Listen to me. Every single day you wake up, there are two versions of you fighting for control. One version says, I'm tired. I'll start tomorrow. It's too hard. The other version said, get up. I'll work harder. I'll become unstoppable. The problem is not the world. The problem is the weak version of you that you keep protecting. You protect it when you hit the snooze button. You protect it when you quit early. You protect it when you choose comfort over growth. But greatness demands something different. Greatness demands that you kill the weak version of yourself. Not tomorrow, not next year, today, right now. The weak version of you loves excuses. The strong version of you creates results. The weak version says, I hope things change. The strong version says, I will change things. I will change things. You can't build a powerful life with a weak mindset. You must wake up every morning and ask yourself, which version of me wins today? Because champions don't negotiate with weakness. They destroy it. They wake up when they don't feel like it. They work when nobody is watching. They push when their body says stop. That is how you transform. Success is not about becoming someone new. It's about removing the weak version of who you used to be. So today I challenge you, kill the excuses, kill the laziness, kill the fear. And when you do, you won't recognize the person you become. And the world will have no choice but to respect you inside every human being. Then there are two forces constantly competing for control. One version of you is driven, disciplined, and determined to grow. The other version is comfortable with mediocrity, quick to surrender, and always searching for the easiest path. These two versions exist at the same time, in the same mind, in the same body, and every day they fight for the right to decide your actions. This battle is not something that happens once in a lifetime. It happens every single morning when you wake up, every time you face difficulty, and every time you must choose between what is easy and what is necessary. The weak version of you loves comfort. It whispers soft excuses that feel reasonable in the moment. It tells you that resting a little longer will not matter, that skipping one day of effort will not affect your future, and that the challenges in front of you are too big to face right now. It convinces you that you deserve comfort more than you deserve growth. It tells you that waiting for motivation is acceptable. It tries to protect you from discomfort, but in doing so, it also protects you from progress. The stronger version of you speaks differently. It does not shout at first. Shout at first. Sometimes it speaks quietly, almost like a reminder buried deep inside your mind. It tells you that you are capable more than what you are currently doing. It reminds you that every difficult moment is an opportunity to grow stronger. It pushes you to take responsibility for your life instead of blaming circumstances. While the weak version looks for reasons to stop, the stronger version looks for reasons to keep moving forward. These two sides are always present. The difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck is not the absence of weakness. Everyone feels doubt, fatigue, fear, and hesitation. The difference is which voice they choose to listen to. Some people feed the weak version so often that it becomes dominant. They repeat habits of avoidance, delay, and excuses until those behaviors become their normal way of living. Over time, the weak version gains more influence because it has been practiced more. Other people slowly strengthen a powerful version of themselves through repeated decisions. They choose discipline when comfort calls. They choose effort when laziness appears. Each time they make that choice, the stronger version becomes more confident. Just like a muscle grows when it is used, the disciplined side of a person becomes stronger through consistent action. The internal conflict between these two versions often shows itself in ordinary moments that seem small, but are actually very important. When the alarm clock rings early in the morning, the weak version immediately begins negotiating. It tells you that your body needs more rest, and that one extra hour will not hurt your goals. The stronger version reminds you why you set the alarm in the first place. It reminds you of the goals you promised yourself you would chase. When you face a difficult task, the weak version searches for distraction. Suddenly, your phone becomes more interesting, your environment feels uncomfortable, and your mind finds reasons to delay starting to work. The stronger version tells you to begin even if you do not feel ready. It understands that momentum often appears only after action begins. The same battle appears when fear enters your mind. Fear of failure, embarrassment, fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection. The weak version tells you to avoid the risk so that you never experience the pain of failure, convinces you that staying safe is smarter than trying. The stronger version understands something different. It recognizes that growth requires stepping into uncertainty. It knows that failure is not proof of weakness, but proof of effort. What makes this struggle powerful is that both voices sound like they belong to you. Neither one feels foreign. The weak voice often sounds logical and comforting. The stronger voice sometimes feels demanding and uncomfortable. Because of this, many people mistake comfort for wisdom. They assume that the easier choice is the smarter one, when in reality, it is simply the more comfortable one. Over time, the choices you make determine which version becomes your dominant identity. Identity is not created by what you say about yourself. It is created by what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly choose comfort, avoidance, and delay, the weak version begins to define who you are. But if you repeatedly choose effort, responsibility, and courage, the stronger version gradually becomes your natural state. One important truth about these two versions is that neither one disappears completely. Even people who appear extremely disciplined still experience moments when the weaker voice tries to return. The difference is that they recognize the voice quickly and refuse to give it control. They treat weakness like a signal, not a command. When the mind says to stop, they examine whether stopping is truly necessary or simply a habit of comfort. This internal battle is the reason why success cannot be explained only by talent or intelligence. Many talented individuals never reach their potential because the weaker version of themselves consistently wins the daily battles. At the same time, many ordinary individuals achieve extraordinary growth because they train themselves to let the stronger version lead their decisions. The presence of these two versions also explains why change feels difficult. When you attempt to build a new habit, the weaker version feels threatened because it loses control when discipline increases. That is why it becomes louder at the beginning of change. It tries to convince you that the effort is unnecessary or unsustainable. It may remind you of past failure to make you doubt your ability to succeed this time. But if you continue acting in favor of a stronger version, something interesting happens. The resistance slowly weakens. What once felt difficult begins to feel normal. Actions that require intense mental effort start to become automatic. The stronger version of you begins to operate without constant struggle. Another important aspect of these two versions is how they interpret challenges. The weaker version views obstacles as signals to quit. When difficulty appears, it concludes that the task is impossible or unfair. It focuses on the discomfort rather than the opportunity hidden within the challenge. The stronger version interprets the same obstacles differently. It sees them as training. It understands that every obstacle carries a lesson that increases capability. This difference in interpretation affects emotional resilience. When the weaker version dominates, setbacks feel personal and discouraging. Failure becomes a reason to stop trying. When the stronger version leads, setbacks become information. Instead of asking the why is this happening to me, the stronger version asks, what can I learn from this? The environment around you also influences which version becomes stronger. If you spend most of your time in environments that reward comfort and avoid effort, the weaker version becomes easier to follow. But when you surround yourself with people and situations that value discipline, growth, and accountability, the stronger version receives reinforcement. However, environment alone cannot decide the outcome. The ultimate decision still happens within your mind. Every person, regardless of their surrounding, still experiences the moment where a choice must be made. That moment is where identity is shaped. It is important to understand that the weaker version is not purely negative in its origin. It evolved as a way to conserve energy and avoid danger. In earlier stages of human history, conserving energy was necessary for survival. But in the modern world, where progress often requires sustained effort and long-term focus, relying too heavily on this instinct can prevent personal growth. Therefore, the goal is not to pretend the weaker voice does not exist. The goal is to understand it and refuse to let it control your direction. Awareness is powerful. Once you begin recognizing when the weaker version is speaking, you gain the ability to pause and choose a different response. Many people assume that strong individuals never feel doubt or laziness. In reality, strong individuals simply refuse to obey those feelings automatically. They accept that the weak voice will appear, but treat it like background noise rather than leadership. Another important truth is that the stronger version of you is not built through one dramatic moment. It is built through thousands of small decisions. Each time you choose to act, despite discomfort, you add another layer of strength to your identity. Each time you choose effort instead of excusing, you slightly shift the balance of power inside your mind. These small decisions accumulate over time. Weeks turn into months, and months turn into years. Eventually, the disciplined choices you once struggled to make become the default pattern of your life. At that point, the stronger version is no longer something you must constantly force. It becomes the natural expression of who you are. Understanding that two versions of you exist gives you a powerful advantage. It allows you to separate your identity from your impulses. When laziness, fear, or doubt appear, you no longer assume that those feelings define you. Instead, you recognize them as the voice of the weaker version trying to take control. That awareness creates a moment of freedom where you can decide which version will act. Life continuously presents opportunities for this decision. Every challenge, every responsibility, every moment of effort is another chance to strengthen the version of you that moves forward rather than backward. The battle between weakness and strength is ongoing, but the outcome is shaped by daily choices. Each decision either feeds the version of you that seeks comfort or the version that seeks growth. Over time, the version you feed becomes the version you live. The excuses are one of the most powerful habits that keep people trapped in the weaker version of themselves. They often sound harmless, logical, and even justified. At first, an excuse does not feel like surrender. It feels like a reasonable explanation for why something cannot be done right now. But over time, repeated excuses slowly build a mindset where avoiding responsibility becomes normal. This is how the weaker version of a person grows stronger. An excuse usually begins in a moment of discomfort. The mind recognizes that effort, discipline, or courage will be required. Instead of immediately taking action, another thought appears that attempts to reduce the pressure of responsibility. It may say that the timing is wrong, the conditions are not ideal, or that someone else is responsible for the situation. These explanations allow the mind to step away from the challenge without feeling guilty. At the beginning, these explanations, a person may delay one task because they feel tired, skip one opportunity because they feel uncertain, or avoid one difficult conversation because it feels uncomfortable. Each individual excuse appears insignificant, but the real danger lies in repetition. When excuses become a regular response to difficulty, they start forming a pattern of thinking. The weaker version of a person depends heavily on this pattern. It thrives when responsibility is constantly redirected away from the self. Instead of saying, "I did not prepare enough," the excuse says, "The situation was unfair." Instead of saying, "I need to work harder," the excuse says, "Other people had advantages." These statements protect the ego in the short term, but they also prevent growth in the long term. Excuses often disguise themselves as logic. The mind becomes extremely creative when it wants to avoid discomfort. It can generate convincing stories about why effort should be delayed. A person might say they will start tomorrow because tomorrow feels more organized, more convenient, or more motivated. The problem is that tomorrow rarely arrives with the magical conditions that excuses promise. This cycle creates a dangerous illusion. The person believes they still intend to succeed someday, even though their actions repeatedly postpone progress. But because the intention still exists in their mind, they feel less urgency to change their behavior. In reality, the gap between intention and action slowly grows larger. Another powerful aspect of excuses is how they spread from one area of life to another. A person who frequently makes excuses in one situation often begins using the same pattern elsewhere. Avoiding a difficult workout becomes similar to avoiding a difficult project. Skipping practice becomes similar to skipping preparation. Over time, excuses stop being occasional responses and start becoming part of a person's identity. The weaker version of a person relies on this identity. When someone begins to believe that circumstances control their outcomes, they stop searching for ways to improve their influence over those circumstances. They begin to expect obstacles rather than solutions. This mindset removes the sense of personal power that is necessary for growth. Not as necessary for growth. Excuses also affect the way people interpret failure. When the weaker version is dominant, failure becomes something that must be defended against, rather than something that can be learned from. The mind quickly searches for external explanations. Perhaps the environment was unfair, the instructions were unclear, or the challenge was unreasonable. These explanations may contain some truth, but focusing only on them prevents deeper reflection. Growth requires a different approach. It requires asking uncomfortable questions about one's own preparation, effort, and strategy. The weaker version avoids these questions because they threaten the comfort of the ego. Accepting responsibility can feel painful because it forces a person to admit that improvement is necessary. However, responsibility also carries power. When a person accepts that their actions influence their outcomes, they regain control over their future. Instead of waiting for conditions to improve, they begin improving themselves. The weaker version resists this shift because it removes the protective shield of excuses. Excuses also reduce the urgency of action. When a person believes that something cannot be done because of external limitations, the mind relaxes. There is no longer a reason to push beyond current effort levels. The challenge appears closed. But when excuses are removed, the mind must confront the possibility that progress is still achievable with more creativity, persistence, or learning. This is why individuals who eliminate excuses often appear unusually determined. They refuse to accept explanations that remove responsibility from their own actions. When something goes wrong, they ask what they can change rather than what they can blame. This attitude creates continuous improvement because every setback becomes a lesson instead of a barrier. Excuses also influence the emotional state of a person. When someone repeatedly avoids challenges, they may temporarily feel relief because the discomfort disappears. However, this relief is short-lived. Over time, the mind becomes aware that important goals are being postponed. This awareness can create frustration, guilt, or a sense of stagnation. The stronger version of a person handles discomfort differently. Instead of avoiding it, they accept that discomfort is often a sign of growth. Difficult tasks feel difficult precisely because they require new skills or higher effort. By confronting these tasks instead of avoiding them, the person slowly increases their capacity. Excuses prevent this process from happening. They act like barriers that block exposure to the very challenges that would develop strength. A person who constantly avoids effort never gives themselves a chance to discover what they are capable of achieving. Another subtle way excuses feed weakness is through comparison with others. The mind may justify inactivity by pointing to people who appear to have easier circumstances. It may focus on advantages that others possess, such as resources, connections, or natural talent. Well, these differences may exist. Focusing on them can become another form of avoidance. The weaker version of a person becomes comfortable with the belief that success depends mostly on factors outside their control. This belief reduces motivation because effort seems less meaningful. If outcomes are determined by luck or privilege alone, then personal discipline appears unnecessary. In contrast, individuals who reject excuses focus primarily on what they can influence. They understand that circumstances are rarely perfect. Instead of waiting for fairness, they concentrate on maximizing the opportunities available to them. This perspective does not deny that challenges exist, but it refuses to allow those challenges to define the entire story. Excuses also have a social dimension. When people spend time in environments where excuses are common, the behavior becomes normalized. Conversations begin to revolve around complaints rather than solutions. The group reinforces the belief that progress is impossible because of external barriers. This collective mindset strengthens the weaker version within each individual. However, environments can also encourage accountability. When individuals are surrounded by people who value effort and responsibility, excuses are challenged rather than accepted. In such environments, people are encouraged to search for solutions instead of explanations. Breaking the habit of excuses requires awareness and honesty. The first step is recognizing when an explanation is truly valid and when it is simply a way to avoid effort. This distinction is not always easy, because excuses often contain partial truths. A situation may indeed be difficult or inconvenient, but difficulty does not necessarily mean impossibility. The second step is replacing excuses with questions that promote action. Instead of asking why something cannot be done, the mind begins asking how it might be done. This shift in questioning activates creativity and problem solving. It forces the brain to explore alternatives instead of shutting down. The third step involves accepting temporary discomfort as part of progress. Many excuses arise because people want to feel confident or motivated before taking action. In reality, motivation often appears after action begins. By starting despite uncertainty, a person creates momentum that gradually builds confidence. Over time, reducing excuses changes the way a person views themselves. Instead of seeing themselves as someone limited by circumstances, they begin to see themselves as someone capable of influencing outcomes through effort. This shift strengthens discipline because actions become aligned with a new identity. The weaker version loses power when excuses are no longer accepted automatically. Without excuses to protect it, the weaker version must confront challenges directly. This confrontation is uncomfortable at first, but it also creates the conditions necessary for growth. Ultimately, excuses are not just words or thoughts. They are decisions disguised as explanations. Each excuse represents a moment where action was replaced with avoidance. When these moments accumulate, they create a life defined by missed opportunities. When excuses are removed, the same moments become opportunities for progress. Instead of stepping back from difficulty, a person steps forward. Each step may be small, but over time, these steps build strength, resilience, and confidence. The weaker version depends on excuses to survive, and when those excuses disappear, its influence gradually fades. Discipline is often misunderstood as a harsh form of control or punishment, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful tools a person can develop to build strength within themselves. Discipline is the ability to act according to what needs to be done, rather than what feels comfortable in the moment. It is the force that allows the stronger version of a person to take charge when emotions, fatigue, or distractions try to take control. Every human being experiences moments when motivation disappears. Motivation is emotional and temporary. It comes and goes depending on mood, environment, and circumstances. When motivation is high, it is easy to take action. Tasks feel exciting, goals feel achievable, and effort feels rewarding. However, when motivation fades, the weak version of a person often begins to dominate. This is where discipline becomes essential. Discipline does not depend on excitement or inspiration. Instead, it depends on commitment. When a person decides that certain actions must be completed, regardless of mood, discipline begins to form. The stronger version of a person relies on this consistency because it creates stability in behavior. Instead of constantly negotiating with emotions, disciplined individuals follow routines that guide their actions. In the early stages, discipline can feel difficult because it requires breaking old habits. The mind naturally prefers comfort and efficiency. If someone has spent years avoiding effort or delaying responsibility, the first attempts at discipline may feel uncomfortable or unnatural. The weaker version of the mind may protest strongly, arguing that the new behavior is unnecessary or too demanding. This resistance is normal because discipline represents change. Change forces the mind to operate outside familiar patterns. The brain is designed to conserve energy, so it often tries to return to habits that require less effort. However, when a person continues practicing disciplined actions, the brain slowly adapts. What once required significant mental effort begins to require less resistance. This process is similar to physical training. When a person lifts weights for the first time, their muscles experience strain because they are not used to the stress. With repeated training, the muscles adapt and grow stronger. Discipline works in a similar way within the mind. Each time a person chooses to act despite discomfort, their mental resilience increases. One of the most powerful aspects of discipline is its ability to create reliability. When a person consistently follows through on their commitments, they build trust in themselves. Self-trust is extremely important because it affects confidence. When individuals repeatedly break promises to themselves, they begin to doubt their ability to follow through on future goals. Discipline reverses this pattern. Every completed task becomes evidence that the stronger version of the person is capable of taking control. Over time, this evidence accumulates. The person begins to believe in their own ability to handle difficult situations because they have repeatedly proven it through action. Another important element of discipline is structure. Without structure, many people drift through their days reacting to circumstances instead of directing their efforts intentionally. Discipline introduces routines that reduce the need for constant decision-making. Instead of asking whether they should complete a task, disciplined individuals follow pre-established plans. For example, a person who commits to exercising at a specific time each day does not spend energy debating whether to exercise. The decision has already been made. By removing unnecessary decisions, discipline reduces the opportunity for excuses to appear. This strengthens the stronger version of the individual because action becomes automatic. Discipline also strengthens focus. In modern environments, distractions are everywhere. Digital devices, notification, entertainment, and social media constantly compete for attention. The weaker version of a person easily becomes trapped in these distractions because they provide instant gratification with minimal effort. The stronger version learns to manage attention intentionally. Discipline allows a person to prioritize tasks, contribute to long-term goals rather than short-term comfort. This ability to delay gratification is one of the defining characteristics of personal growth. It means choosing progress today, even when the rewards may not appear immediately. Another important role of discipline is emotional stability. Emotions are powerful and valuable, but they can also be unpredictable. If a person's actions are controlled entirely by emotional states, their productivity and progress become inconsistent. Some days they may feel energetic and focused, while other days they may feel discouraged or distracted. Discipline provides a stable foundation that exists beyond emotional fluctuation. When a person commits to consistent action, they continue moving forward even when emotions change. This stability is what allows long-term goals to be achieved. Discipline also develops resilience. Challenges and setbacks are unavoidable in any meaningful pursuit. When difficulties appear, the weaker version of the mind may interpret them as signs that quitting is the best option. Discipline changes this interpretation. It trains the mind to view obstacles as part of the process rather than proof of failure. Each time a disciplined person continues working, despite difficulty, they reinforce the belief that persistence is possible. This belief becomes stronger with experience. Eventually, challenges that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable because the person has built confidence through repeated effort. Another reason discipline strengthens the powerful version of a person is that it builds momentum. Momentum occurs when consistent action creates a chain of progress. Each completed task leads naturally to the next one. This chain becomes easier to maintain than to break. For example, someone who studies consistently every day builds knowledge gradually. Over time, this knowledge compounds and makes future learning easier. The same principle applies to fitness, skill development, and personal growth. Discipline creates the conditions for progress to accumulate. The opposite is also true. When discipline is absent, inconsistency disrupts progress. Tasks remain unfinished, habits remain unstable, and goals remain distant. The weaker version thrives in this environment because inconsistency allows excuses to appear frequently. Discipline also shapes identity. People often describe themselves based on their habits and behaviors. Someone who consistently follows through on commitments begins to see themselves as a reliable and determined person. This self-image reinforces disciplined behavior because actions start aligning with identity. Identity plays a powerful role in human behavior. When a person believes they are disciplined, they naturally act in ways that support that belief. Each disciplined action becomes both a result of identity and a reinforcement of it. However, building discipline does not require perfection. Many people abandon discipline routines after a single mistake because they believe failure means the system does not work. In reality, discipline grows through persistence, not perfection. Occasional setbacks are normal. The key difference between the weaker and stronger versions of a person lies in their response to these setbacks. The weaker version uses mistakes as justification to quit entirely. The stronger version views mistakes as temporary interruptions and quickly returns to the routine. Another important aspect of discipline is its ability to simplify life. At first, discipline may seem restrictive because it involves rules and commitments. However, over time, it actually creates freedom. When important responsibilities are handled consistently, stress and uncertainty decrease. A disciplined person does not constantly worry about unfinished tasks because they know those tasks will be addressed according to their routine. This clarity allows the mind to focus more effectively on meaningful goals rather than being overwhelmed by chaos. Discipline also improves time management. Time is one of the most valuable resources every person possesses, yet it's also one of the easiest to waste. Without discipline, hours can disappear through distractions and procrastination. With discipline, time is used intentionally. Intentional use of time leads to visible progress. Even small improvements made consistently can produce significant results over months and years. This gradual progress strengthens confidence because the person can see tangible evidence that their efforts are working. Another powerful effect of discipline is the development of patience. Many goals require sustained effort over long periods before results become visible. The weaker version often becomes frustrated when rewards are delayed. It wants immediate proof that effort is worthwhile. Discipline allows a person to continue working even when results are not immediately visible. It teaches the mind to trust the process rather than relying on constant feedback. Over time, this patience becomes one of the most valuable strengths a person can possess. Discipline also spreads across different areas of life. When someone develops disciplined habits in one area, such as health or study, the mindset often transfers to other responsibilities. The person becomes more organized, more reliable, and more focused overall. This spread of discipline gradually transforms the individual. What began as a small commitment to consistent action evolves into a broader approach to life. The stronger version of the person becomes more dominant because disciplined choices are repeated in many different situations. Ultimately, discipline strengthens the powerful version of a person by creating a consistent pattern of action that resists weakness. Each disciplined choice reinforces the belief that effort matters and progress is possible. Over time, this belief becomes deeply embedded in identity. The stronger version of the individual does not rely on temporary motivation or perfect condition. It relies on discipline as a stable foundation. Through repeated practice, discipline transforms effort into habit, habit into character, and character lasting strength. Comfort is one of the most attractive forces in human life. It feels safe, familiar, and relaxing. The human mind naturally seeks comfort because it reduces stress and requires less effort. At first glance, comfort does not appear harmful. Rest, relaxation, and ease are necessary parts of a balanced life. However, when comfort becomes the dominant priority in a person's decisions, it slowly begins to limit growth. Over time, the constant pursuit of comfort can quietly weaken ambition, reduce resilience, and prevent a person from discovering their full potential. Growth almost always requires some level of discomfort. Learning a new skill demands patience and repeated mistakes. Building physical strength requires pushing the body beyond what it is used to doing. Developing confidence often involves facing situations that feel intimidating at first. These experiences are uncomfortable not because they are harmful, but because they challenge the mind and body to adapt. When someone consistently chooses comfort over challenge, they avoid the very situations that will help them grow. The weak version of a person thrives in comfort because it removes pressure to improve. If life remains easy and predictable, there is no urgent reason to change habits or develop new abilities. The mind becomes satisfied with maintaining the current level of effort instead of seeking progress. Comfort also creates a sense of false security. When everything feels easy, a person may begin to believe that their current abilities are enough to handle future challenges. However, life rarely stays comfortable forever. Unexpected obstacles, responsibilities, and opportunities appear throughout life. If someone has spent years avoiding difficulty, they may struggle when real challenges finally arrive. This is one of the hidden dangers of excessive comfort. It delays the development of resilience. Resilience is the ability to remain steady and focused even when circumstances become difficult. It is built through experience with struggle, effort, and problem solving. Without exposure to these experiences, resilience remains weak. The mind gradually adapts to whatever level of difficulty it experiences regularly. If a person consistently challenges themselves, their tolerance for effort increases. Tasks that once felt overwhelming eventually feel manageable. On the other hand, if a person consistently avoids challenge, their tolerance for effort decreases. Even small difficulties may begin to feel frustrating or exhausting. This shift in tolerance happens slowly and often without being noticed. A person may start by avoiding large challenges, telling themselves that they will try later when conditions improve. Over time, this avoidance spreads to smaller tasks. Responsibilities that once seemed normal begin to feel like burdens. Motivation decreases because the mind has grown accustomed to comfort. Comfort also weakens discipline. Discipline requires the ability to act even when something feels difficult or inconvenient. If a person constantly chooses the easiest option, the habit of discipline begins to disappear. The mind becomes trained to expect convenience rather than effort. When effort is finally required, it feels far more difficult than it actually is. Another effect of excessive comfort is the reduction of curiosity and exploration. Growth often begins with curiosity about new ideas, new skills, and new experiences. However, curiosity sometimes leads people into unfamiliar situations. These situations may involve uncertainty, risk of failure, or temporary embarrassment. The weak version of a person prefers to stay within familiar routines where outcomes are predictable. While familiarity can feel safe, it can also limit exposure to opportunities. Many valuable experiences exist outside the boundaries of what feels comfortable. By avoiding unfamiliar situations, a person may unknowingly limit their own development. Comfort can also influence how people use their time. Activities that provide immediate pleasure are often easier to choose than activities that require effort but lead to long-term benefits. Watching entertainment, scrolling through social media, or resting excessively may feel enjoyable in the moment. These activities are not harmful in moderation, but when they dominate daily life, they replace time that could have been used for growth. The stronger version of a person understands that comfort should be balanced with challenge. Instead of eliminating comfort completely, they place it in the right position. Comfort becomes a reward after effort rather than a substitute for effort. This balance allows a person to recover and relax without losing momentum in their goals. Another way comfort limits growth is by reducing exposure to failure. It is often uncomfortable because it challenges a person's confidence and expectations. However, failure is also one of the most effective teachers. Each failure reveals information about what does not work and what can be improved. When someone avoids situations where failure is possible, they also avoid valuable lessons. The fear of discomfort prevents them from experimenting and improving. Over time, their progress slows because they are not gaining new experience. Comfort also affects how people respond to criticism. Constructive criticism can be uncomfortable because it highlights areas where improvement is needed. The weak version of a person may reject criticism immediately because it threatens their sense of ease. Instead of viewing feedback as helpful information, they interpret it as a personal attack. The stronger version approaches criticism differently. Even when feedback feels uncomfortable, they examine it carefully to see whether it contains useful insights. This willingness to confront discomfort allows them to improve faster than someone who avoids feedback entirely. Another subtle effect of comfort is the gradual narrowing of ambition. When a person becomes too comfortable with their current situation, they may stop imagining bigger possibilities. Goals become smaller and safer because they require less disruption to existing routine. The mind begins to settle for stability instead of growth. Ambition often requires stepping into uncertainty. Pursuing meaningful goals may involve risk, long hours of work, and the possibility of setbacks. These factors create discomfort, but they also create opportunities for transformation. Without the willingness to experience discomfort, ambition loses its power. Comfort can also influence social behavior. People often surround themselves with others who share similar habits and attitudes. If a group prioritizes comfort and avoids challenge, the entire group may reinforce those behaviors. Conversations may revolve around complaints about effort or jokes about avoiding responsibility. In contrast, environments that encourage growth often normalize effort and persistence. People in these environments challenge each other to improve rather than encouraging each other to remain comfortable. The social influence of such environments can make it easier to embrace discomfort as a normal part of progress. Another reason comfort can limit growth is that it delays decision-making. Important decisions often involve uncertainty and risk. The weak version of a person may postpone decisions indefinitely because taking action might disturb their comfort. They may wait for perfect conditions or complete certainty before moving forward. Unfortunately, perfect conditions rarely exist. Opportunities sometimes require quick and courageous decision. When someone becomes too attached to comfort, they may miss opportunities simply because they hesitated too long. Discomfort, on the other hand, often signals that growth is taking place. When a person learns something new, practices a difficult skill, or faces a challenging situation, discomfort naturally appears. Instead of interpreting this feeling as a warning to stop, the stronger version recognizes it as part of the learning process. Over time, repeated exposure to discomfort builds confidence. A person begins to realize that they can handle challenges more effectively than they once believed. Situations that once seemed intimidating become familiar and manageable. This transformation happens only because the individual was willing to move beyond comfort repeatedly. Comfort can also create the illusion that time is unlimited. When life feels easy, people sometimes assume that they can pursue their goals later. They delay important actions because the present moment feels too pleasant to disturb. However, time continues to move forward regardless of comfort. Years can pass quickly when routines remain unchanged. Opportunities that once seemed easily available may disappear as circumstances evolve. Recognizing the value of time often requires stepping out of comfort and committing to meaningful effort. Stronger version of a person does not reject comfort completely, but it refuses to let comfort control important decisions. Instead of asking what feels easiest, it asks, what will lead to growth? This shift in thinking transforms discomfort from something to avoid into something to embrace when necessary. Through repeated experiences with challenge, the mind becomes more adaptable. Difficult tasks become opportunities rather than threats. Confidence grows because the person has evidence that they can survive and learn from discomfort. Gradually, the balance between comfort and challenge changes. Comfort no longer defines the boundaries of action. Instead, it becomes a place of recovery between periods of effort and exploration. This balanced approach allows a person to rest without losing the drive to improve. When comfort is placed above growth, the weaker version of a person becomes dominant. It encourages routines that protect ease but limit potential. When challenge is accepted as a natural part of life, the stronger version grows. It transforms discomfort into experience, effort into progress, and uncertainty into opportunity. Many people believe that motivation is the key to achieving meaningful goals. They wait for the feeling of excitement, energy, or inspiration before they begin working. When motivation appears, they feel ready to act. When it disappears, their effort often disappears with it. This approach seems reasonable at first because motivation feels powerful when it is present. However, motivation is temporary and unpredictable. It comes and goes depending on mood, environment, sleep, stress, and many other factors. Relying only on motivation creates a cycle of inconsistent effort, and inconsistency rarely produces strong results. Consistency operates very differently from motivation. Consistency means showing up and taking action repeatedly, regardless of how strong or weak motivation feels in the moment. It focuses on regular effort rather than emotional energy. When a person commits to consistent action, progress continues even during periods when motivation is low or absent. The difference between these two approaches becomes clear over time. Motivation may create short bursts of intense effort, but these bursts often fade quickly. A person may feel inspired for a few days or weeks and work very hard during that time. When the emotional excitement fades, their activity slows down or stops entirely. As a result, progress becomes uneven. Consistency produces a different pattern. The effort may not always feel exciting or dramatic, but it continues steadily over long periods. Small actions repeated daily or weekly begin to accumulate. Over months and years, this accumulation produces results that appear far greater than what short bursts of motivation could create. One reason consistency is so powerful is because it builds habits. A habit is an action that becomes automatic through repetition. When a behavior is repeated frequently enough, the brain begins to perform it with less conscious effort. Instead of needing constant reminders or emotional encouragement, the action becomes part of a routine. Habits reduce the mental effort required to take action. If someone decides every day whether they should practice a skill, exercise, or work on a goal, they must constantly debate with themselves. This debate often gives the weaker version of the mind an opportunity to create excuses. Consistency removes much of that debate. The decision has already been made, so the focus shifts to simply following the routine. Another advantage of consistency is that it allows gradual improvement. Many skills and achievements cannot be mastered quickly. Learning a language, developing professional expertise, improving physical fitness, or building a successful project often requires thousands of hours of practice. These hours cannot be compressed into a short period of intense motivation. They must be spread across time. Consistency makes this long process manageable. Instead of trying to accomplish everything at once, a person focuses on completing manageable amounts of work regularly. Each small effort adds to the previous one. Over time, these efforts create noticeable progress. Consistency also strengthens discipline. When a person acts consistently, they learn how to work even when they do not feel enthusiastic. This ability is extremely valuable because emotional states change constantly. By practicing action during low motivation moments, a person trains the mind to value commitment more than mood. Another important aspect of consistency is that it builds trust in one's own abilities. When someone repeatedly follows through on their plans, they begin to believe in their reliability. They no longer see themselves as someone who starts things but fails to continue. Instead, they see themselves as someone who completes what they begin. This change in self-perception is powerful. Identity often shapes behavior. If a person believes they are consistent, they naturally try to behave in ways that confirm that belief. Each time they complete their planned actions, their confidence grows stronger. Consistency also reduces the fear of large goals. Many goals appear overwhelming when viewed all at once. For example, writing a book, mastering a complex skill, or building a significant project can seem impossible if someone imagines completing it in a single effort. This overwhelming feeling can cause people to delay starting entirely. Breaking a large goal into small, consistent actions changes this perspective. Instead of focusing on the entire task, a person focuses only on today's step. Writing a few pages, practicing a skill for an hour, or completing a small part of a project becomes manageable. Over time, these small steps accumulate into significant achievements. Consistency also provides a way to measure progress accurately. When effort is repeated regularly, it becomes easier to observe improvement. The person can compare their performance over time and identify patterns. This feedback helps them adjust their strategies and improve their methods. Motivation alone rarely provides this structure. When effort appears only during moments of inspiration, it becomes difficult to track progress or learn from experience. The gaps between periods of work make improvement slower and less predictable. Another strength of consistency is its ability to create momentum. Momentum occurs when continuous action makes further action easier. When a person has worked on something regularly for several weeks or months, it begins to feel natural to continue. Stopping the routine may feel more uncomfortable than maintaining it. This momentum protects progress during difficult periods. Even when challenges arise or motivation temporarily disappears, the existing routine encourages the person to continue. The habit of consistency carries them forward until motivation eventually returns. Consistency also reduces the emotional pressure placed on each individual effort. When people depend on motivation, they often believe every session of work must feel meaningful or exciting. If a particular day feels unproductive, they may become discouraged and stop entirely. A consistent mindset accepts that not every effort will feel extraordinary. Some days will be highly productive, while others may feel slow or difficult. The key is continuing the process regardless of temporary fluctuation. Even imperfect effort contributes to long-term improvement. Another important aspect of consistency is its compounding effect. Just as money grows through compound interest when invested regularly, skills and achievements grow when effort is invested consistently. Each new improvement builds upon the previous one. For example, practicing a skill regularly allows knowledge and experience to accumulate. The more experience a person gains, the easier it becomes to learn additional techniques. Progress begins to accelerate because each new effort builds on a stronger foundation. Consistency also strengthens patience. Many worthwhile goals require long periods before visible results appear. During these early stages, motivation may weaken because the rewards feel distant. Consistency allows a person to continue working even without immediate recognition. Patience developed through consistency helps people stay committed during slow progress. They understand that meaningful results often appear gradually rather than instantly. This understanding prevents frustration from disrupting their efforts. Consistency can also influence other areas of life. When someone develops a routine in one area, such as studying or exercising, the discipline often spreads to other responsibilities. The person becomes more organized, more focused, and more reliable overall. This spreading effect happens because consistency changes how the mind approaches tasks. Instead of asking whether something should be done, the mind asks how it will be done and when. This shift removes hesitation and increases efficiency. Another reason consistency is more powerful than motivation is that it reduces dependence on external circumstances. Motivation can be influenced by many factors outside a person's control, such as environment, stress levels, or temporary emotions. Consistency relies more on internal commitment. By focusing on repeated action rather than emotional readiness, a person gains greater control of their progress. No, they are no longer waiting for the perfect mood or perfect conditions to begin. Instead, they create progress through steady effort, regardless of circumstances. Consistency also teaches resilience. When someone commits to regular action, they inevitably encounter days when effort feels difficult. Continuing through these moments strengthens mental endurance. The person learns that temporary discomfort does not need to stop their progress. Over time, this resilience becomes part of their identity. Challenges that once disrupted their efforts begin to feel manageable because they have developed confidence in their ability to persist. Motivation still has value. It can provide bursts of energy and inspiration that help people start new projects or overcome particularly difficult moments. However, motivation works best when it supports a foundation of consistent action rather than replacing it. When motivation appears, it can increase productivity and enthusiasm. When it fades, consistency ensures that progress continues. This combination creates a powerful system for long-term achievement. The most successful individuals in many fields are not necessarily the most motivated at every moment. Instead, they are often the most consistent. They show up repeatedly, practice their skills regularly, and continue working even when excitement fades. Through repeated effort, they gradually move further ahead of those who rely only on temporary inspiration. Their progress may seem slow at first, but over time becomes substantial because it never stops. Consistency transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary results. It replaces irregular bursts of action with a steady flow of progress. By focusing on regular practice rather than waiting for motivation, a person creates a reliable path toward improvement and long-term success. Success is often imagined as a destination filled with rewards, recognition, and personal satisfaction. People see the visible results of achievement and naturally focus on the benefit that come with it. However, what is often overlooked is the price that must be paid long before those rewards appear. Success rarely arrives without sacrifice. Sacrifice is the willingness to give up certain comforts, distractions, or opportunities in order to focus on a greater goal. Every meaningful goal requires time, energy, and attention. These resources are limited. Because of this limitation, choosing to pursue one goal automatically means choosing not to spend that time and energy elsewhere. This is the essence of sacrifice. It is not always about losing something permanently, but it often means delaying immediate pleasures in order to invest in long-term growth. How many people desire success, but fewer are willing to accept the sacrifices that accompany it? The idea of achieving something great can feel exciting, yet the daily discipline required to reach that goal can feel demanding. When faced with this reality, the weaker version of a person may begin to search for ways to reduce the effort required. It looks for shortcuts or hopes for results without making difficult choices. Sacrifice becomes a dividing line between intention and commitment. Intention means wanting something in theory. Commitment means adjusting your lifestyle in order to make that goal possible. This adjustment often requires giving up habits or activities that feel comfortable but do not contribute to pride. One of the most common sacrifices involves time. Time is the foundation of every achievement. Learning new skills, building expertise, and completing complex projects all require many hours of focused effort. Those hours must come from somewhere. A person pursuing success may need to spend less time on entertainment, idle distractions, or unproductive routines. At first, this shift may feel uncomfortable. Activities that once filled the day easily may need to be replaced with focused work or deliberate practice. The weaker version of the mind may resist this change, arguing that life should remain relaxed and easy. However, progress begins when a person recognizes that time invested in growth produces far greater rewards in the future. Another form of sacrifice involves comfort. Achieving meaningful goals often requires stepping into situations that feel uncertain or challenging. These situations may involve long hours of work, learning from mistakes, or facing criticism. Comfort encourages avoidance of these experiences because they can create temporary stress. Sacrifice means accepting that discomfort is sometimes necessary. It means understanding that the path toward improvement may include frustration, fatigue, and repeated attempts before success appears. This willingness to endure discomfort strengthens resilience and prepares a person for larger challenges. Financial sacrifice can also play a role in the pursuit of success. Some goals require investing money into education, tools, training, or resources that support development. In certain cases, individuals may temporarily reduce spending on non-essential items in order to invest in opportunities that will produce greater value later. This type of sacrifice reflects a long-term perspective. Instead of prioritizing immediate satisfaction, the person chooses to invest in growth that may not produce visible results right away. Over time, these investments can open doors to opportunities that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Sacrifice also appears in the form of patience. Many people expect success to arrive quickly once they begin working toward a goal. When results take longer than expected, frustration may appear. The weaker version of the mind may interpret slow progress as a sign that the effort is not worthwhile. In reality, most meaningful achievements develop gradually. Skills improve step by step, experience accumulates slowly, and recognition often follows long periods of unseen effort. Patience becomes a form of sacrifice because it requires trust in the process, even when immediate rewards are absent. Another important sacrifice involves social choices. People pursuing demanding goals may sometimes need to reduce time spent in social activities that do not align with their priorities. This does not mean abandoning relationships entirely, but it may involve choosing carefully how time is spent with others. Certain environments encourage growth, while others may encourage distraction or complacency. The stronger version of a person becomes aware of this difference and chooses surroundings that support their ambitions. This decision can sometimes feel difficult because it may require stepping away from familiar routines or expectations. Sacrifice can also involve the willingness to face failure repeatedly. Failure is often uncomfortable because it challenges confidence and exposes weaknesses. The weaker version of the mind tries to avoid situations where failure is possible, preferring to stay within areas where success feels guaranteed. However, growth rarely occurs in places where failure is impossible. New challenges bring the risk of mistakes, but they also bring opportunities to learn. Each failure provides information that can be used to improve future attempts. Accepting this process requires sacrificing the desire to always appear successful. Another subtle sacrifice is the loss of immediate recognition. Many people seek approval and praise from others as a form of motivation. When working toward long-term goals, recognition may not appear for a long time. The effort may remain invisible to most people during the early stages. Continuing to work without constant praise requires internal motivation. The person must believe in the value of their efforts, even when external validation is limited. This belief becomes a powerful source of strength because it allows progress to continue regardless of outside opinions. Sacrifice also strengthens character. Each time a person chooses long-term goals over short-term comfort, they reinforce discipline and self-control. These qualities become part of their identity. Over time, the person becomes someone who is known for dedication and reliability. Character built through sacrifice often influences many areas of life. The habits developed while pursuing one goal can improve performance in other responsibilities as well. A person who learns to manage time, focus attention, and persist through challenges becomes better prepared for future opportunities. It is important to understand that sacrifice does not mean constant suffering or the elimination of joy from life. Instead, it involves thoughtful prioritization. A person decides which goals matter most and aligns their actions with those priorities. Temporary sacrifices are made to support long-term fulfillment. When sacrifices are connected to meaningful goals, they become easier to accept. The effort feels purposeful rather than burdensome. Each decision to invest time and energy into growth becomes a step towards something valuable. Another powerful aspect of sacrifice is its ability to create appreciation. When success finally arrives after a period of disciplined effort, the achievement carries deeper meaning. The person remembers the challenges faced along the way and understands the value of the journey. Without sacrifice, success might feel shallow or temporary. When something is obtained without effort, it often lacks the emotional significance that comes from overcoming obstacles. Sacrifice transforms success into a reflection of persistence and determination. Sacrifice also separates those who only wish for success from those who truly pursue it. Many individuals share similar dreams, but only some willing to adjust their lifestyles to make those dreams possible. The difference often lies in daily decisions about how time, energy, and focus are used. The stronger version of a person understands that sacrifice is not a punishment, but a form of investment. Each sacrifice represents a choice to build something greater in the future. Instead of viewing sacrifice as loss, they see it as preparation for opportunity. Over time, the cumulative effect of these sacrifices becomes visible. Skills become sharper, knowledge becomes deeper, and confidence becomes stronger. Opportunities begin to appear because the individual is prepared to take advantage of them. The path toward success is rarely defined by a single dramatic moment. Instead, it is shaped by countless small decisions made consistently over time. Each decision to prioritize growth over comfort adds momentum to the journey. When a person embraces the reality that success requires sacrifice, they develop a clearer understanding of what it takes to achieve meaningful goals. This understanding strengthens commitment because expectations become realistic. Challenges no longer feel surprising. They become part of the process. Through sacrifice, the stronger version of a person gains control over their direction. They learn that every choice carries consequences and that investing effort today creates possibilities tomorrow. The willingness to sacrifice transforms dreams from distant ideas into achievable realities built through deliberate action. One of the most powerful habits that keeps people trapped in weakness is the constant negotiation with their own limitation. Negotiation in this sense does not mean thoughtful reflection or planning. It refers to the moment when a person knows what they should do, yet begins creating internal arguments to avoid doing it. Instead of acting with clarity and discipline, the mind begins a conversation that slowly weakens commitment. This negotiation often begins when effort or discomfort appears. The mind immediately looks for alternatives that require less energy. A person may tell themselves that they will start later, that today is not the right moment, or that the task can wait without consequences. These thoughts feel reasonable at the time because they reduce immediate pressure. However, they also delay progress. The weaker version of a person thrives in this negotiation. Every time a person debates whether they should follow through on a responsibility, they give weakness an opportunity to win. Instead of treating commitments as decisions that have already been made, they treat them as options that can be reconsidered repeatedly. When commitments are treated as optional, discipline begins to weaken. The mind learns that promises can be broken without serious consequences. Over time, the pattern becomes automatic. Instead of asking how to complete a task, the mind asks whether completing it is necessary at all. This internal negotiation often sounds harmless. It may appear as small compromises with oneself. A person may decide to skip one practice session, delay one important task, or avoid one uncomfortable conversation. Each compromise feels small, but the accumulation of these decisions slowly builds a habit of avoidance. The danger lies in repetition. When negotiation becomes a regular response to challenge, the weaker version of the mind becomes stronger. The brain learns that discomfort leads to discussion rather than action. Instead of moving forward immediately, the person begins to search for reasons to stop. The stronger version of a person approaches commitments differently. Once a decision has been made, it is treated as final. The person does not reopen the discussion each time the task feels difficult. They understand that negotiating with weakness only drains energy and delays progress. This mindset simplifies action. When the mind stops debating every responsibility, more attention can be directed toward completing the task itself. Energy is no longer wasted on arguments about whether the effort should happen. The focus shifts entirely toward execution. Negotiation with weakness also affects confidence. When a person frequently talks themselves out of commitments, they begin to doubt their own reliability. They may set goals with enthusiasm, but deep inside they know that their discipline may disappear when things become difficult. This lack of self-trust creates hesitation. The person may become cautious about setting ambitious goals because they are uncertain whether they will follow through. Over time, this uncertainty reduces ambition and limits potential. Breaking the habit of negotiation requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing effort as something that needs constant justification, the person begins to view effort as a normal part of pursuing goals. When discomfort appears, it is expected rather than debated. One useful way to understand this change is by recognizing that feelings are temporary, but decisions can be permanent. Feelings of laziness, fear, or fatigue may appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. If decisions are based entirely on these feelings, actions become unstable. The stronger version of a person allows feelings to exist without allowing to control behavior. A person may feel tired, but still complete their responsibilities. They may feel uncertain, but still take the necessary step toward progress. In this way, actions remain consistent even when emotions fluctuate. Another important element of stopping negotiation is clarity. When a person clearly understands their priorities and goals, it becomes easier to commit fully. Unclear goals invite negotiation because the mind is unsure whether the effort is truly important. Clear goals create stronger commitment. When someone knows exactly what they are working toward and why it matters, the temptation to negotiate decreases. The purpose behind the effort becomes stronger than the temporary discomfort. Negotiation with weakness also appears in the form of excuses disguised as logic. The mind becomes creative when it wants to avoid effort. It may present convincing arguments about why a task should be delayed or modified. These arguments often sound intelligent, which makes them difficult to recognize as avoidance. For example, someone might tell themselves that they will begin working once they feel more prepared. Preparation is valuable, but sometimes it becomes an endless loop that prevents action. The stronger version recognizes when preparation is useful and when it is simply another form of negotiation. Another common form of negotiation occurs with time. A person may promise to start working soon, but that moment keeps moving further into the future. The delay feels harmless because it is always temporary. However, repeated delays can eventually become permanent avoidance. Stopping this pattern requires immediate action. When a responsibility appears, the person begins working before the mind has time to create excuses. Quick action prevents negotiation from gaining momentum. Negotiation also affects how people handle difficulty. When tasks become challenging, the weaker version often suggests reducing effort or quitting entirely. It argues that the task is too demanding or that the goal may not be worth the struggle. The stronger version understands that difficulty is not a sign that something should be abandoned. Difficulty is often a sign that growth is occurring. Skills develop through effort, and effort naturally creates resistance at first. Refusing to negotiate with weakness means accepting that progress may feel uncomfortable at times. Instead of asking whether the effort should continue, the person asks how they can adapt and improve their approach. This approach builds resilience. Each time a person continues despite difficulty, they strengthen their ability to handle future challenges. Over time, obstacles that once seemed overwhelming begin to feel manageable. Another benefit of refusing negotiation is increased efficiency. When the mind stops debating every responsibility, tasks begin sooner and finish faster. The time previously spent arguing with oneself becomes time spent making progress. This efficiency can create momentum. When progress becomes visible, motivation often increases naturally. Success in small tasks encourages further effort, creating a positive cycle of action and improvement. Refusing to negotiate also strengthens personal standards. Standards represent the level of performance a person expects from themselves. When negotiation is common, standards gradually decline. Each compromise lowers expectations slightly. When negotiation is eliminated, standards become stable. The person knows that certain behaviors are simply non-negotiable. Responsibilities are completed, not because they feel easy, but because they align with personal values and commitments. Personal standards influence identity. A person who consistently honors their commitments begins to see themselves as disciplined and reliable. This identity reinforces future behavior. Acting with discipline becomes part of who they are rather than something they struggle to maintain. Another important aspect of this mindset is accountability. When a person refuses to negotiate with weakness, they accept full responsibility for their actions. Instead of blaming circumstances or emotions, they focus on controlling what they can. This accountability creates a sense of empowerment. The person recognizes that their progress depends largely on their own decisions. Instead of waiting for external motivation, they create momentum through deliberate action. Over time, this approach transforms the relationship between effort and success. Effort becomes predictable rather than occasional. Progress becomes steady rather than uncertain. Goals that once seemed distant begin to feel achievable because consistent action replaces hesitation. The weaker version of a person depends on negotiation to survive. It needs constant discussion to justify avoidance. When negotiation disappears, the weaker voice loses much of its influence. Without negotiation, the stronger version gains control. Decisions lead directly to action. Commitments remain stable even when emotions fluctuate. The mind becomes focused on solutions rather than excuses. This transformation does not happen instantly. The habit of negotiation may have been practiced for many years. Changing it requires awareness and repeated effort. Each time a person chooses action instead of debate, they weaken the old pattern. Gradually, the mind adapts to the new approach. Responsibilities are accepted without resistance. Effort becomes routine rather than exceptional. The stronger version of the individual becomes the natural leader of their decision. By refusing to negotiate with weakness, a person removes one of the most common barriers to progress. They replace hesitation with commitment and excuses with action. Through this shift, discipline becomes stronger, confidence grows, and the path toward meaningful achievement becomes clearer. Every action a person repeats eventually becomes a habit, and habits quietly shape the direction of a person's life. Many people focus on major decisions when thinking about success or failure, but the truth is that daily habits often have a greater influence than occasional big choices. The small things someone does every day gradually determine which version of themselves becomes stronger. Whether the stronger, disciplined version of a person grows or the weaker, comfort-seeking version dominates depends largely on the habits that are practiced repeatedly. A habit is essentially a behavior that has been practiced so many times that it begins to happen automatically. The brain is designed to conserve energy, so it prefers turning repeated actions into routines. Once an action becomes a habit, it requires far less mental effort to perform. This can be extremely powerful because it means certain behaviors can continue without constant motivation or intense decision-making. However, habits themselves are neutral. They simply follow whatever pattern has been repeated. If someone repeatedly practices productive behaviors, those behaviors become easier over time. If someone repeatedly practices avoidance, procrastination, or distraction, those behaviors also become easier. In this way, habits act like training for the mind. The weaker version of a person grows stronger when habits of avoidance become common. For example, if someone regularly delays important tasks, their brain begins to associate responsibility with postponement. Each time the person chooses delay instead of action to action, the habit becomes more established. Eventually, procrastination feels natural because the brain expects it. Similarly, when someone frequently chooses distractions over focused work, their attention becomes trained to seek easy stimulation. Quick entertainment, constant scrolling, or unnecessary interruptions slowly shape the brain's expectation. The mind begins to crave immediate pleasure rather than sustained effort. The stronger version of a person develops in the opposite way. Instead of practicing avoidance, the person practices action. Each time they begin a task without delay, they reinforce the habit of taking initiative. Over time, starting becomes easier because the brain has learned that action is a normal response to responsibility. One of the most important aspects of habits is that they often operate below conscious awareness. A person may not notice how many small decisions they make each day. These decisions happen quickly, almost automatically, because they feel insignificant in the moment. They rarely attract attention. However, the accumulation of these small decisions can have enormous consequence over time. A person who spends a little time every day improving their skills may not notice dramatic progress immediately. But months and years later, the difference becomes clear. Consistent effort has gradually built knowledge, experience, and confidence. On the other hand, a person who repeatedly chooses convenience over improvement may also fail to notice the long-term effects. Each individual decision seems harmless, yet over time, the lack of progress becomes visible. Opportunities may pass by because the necessary preparation was never developed. This is why habits are so important in determining which version of a person takes control. The brain gradually adapts to whatever behaviors are repeated most often. If discipline is practiced daily, discipline becomes easier. If avoidance is practiced daily, avoidance becomes easier. Another powerful aspect of habits is their ability to reduce decision fatigue. Occurs when the mind becomes tired from making too many choices. Each decision consumes mental energy. When someone must constantly decide whether to work, study, exercise, or practice a skill, they may become overwhelmed. Habits remove much of this mental burden. When certain behaviors are scheduled and repeated regularly, the need for daily decision-making disappears. The person simply follows the routine. This allows more mental energy to be used for meaningful tasks instead of constant internal debate. For example, a person who develops a habit of studying at the same time every day no longer wastes energy deciding when to start. The routine becomes automatic. The stronger version of the person gains power because action occurs without hesitation. Habits also shape identity. Identity is the way a person sees themselves. Many people describe themselves using patterns of behavior. Someone who regularly reads and learns may begin to see themselves as a learner. Someone who consistently exercises may identify as a disciplined individual. These identities reinforce behavior. When a person believes they are disciplined, they tend to behave in ways that confirm that belief. Each disciplined action strengthens the identity, which then encourages more disciplined action. The weaker version of a person can also create identities through habits. Someone who repeatedly avoids responsibility may begin to see themselves as someone who struggles with discipline. This belief can become self-fulfilling because it influences future choices. Changing habits, therefore, requires more than simply making a single good decision. It requires repeated action over time. At first, new habits may feel difficult because they conflict with existing routines. The brain is used to certain patterns, and breaking those patterns creates resistance is normal. The brain prefers familiar behaviors because they require less energy. However, when a new behavior is repeated consistently, the brain begins to adjust. The new action slowly becomes easier as the neural pathways associated with that behavior grow stronger. One of the most effective ways to build strong habits is through small, manageable steps. Large changes can feel overwhelming, which makes them difficult to maintain. Small actions repeated consistently are far more sustainable. For instance, practicing a skill for a short period every day may seem insignificant at first. Yet this small action builds a routine that can later expand naturally. Once the habit exists, increasing the amount of effort becomes easier. Another important aspect of habits is the environment in which they occur. Environment strongly influences behavior because it provides cues that trigger habits. For example, a workspace designed for focus encourages productive behavior, while an environment filled with distractions encourages avoidance. By adjusting the environment, a person can make positive habits easier to perform and negative habits more difficult. Placing tools for work within easy reach or reducing sources of distraction can support the stronger version of the individual. Habits also influence emotional responses to tasks. When someone consistently practices a challenging activity, their confidence gradually increases. Tasks that once felt intimidating become familiar. This familiarity reduces anxiety and increases willingness to continue. In contrast, avoiding difficult tasks prevents this adaptation from occurring. The longer someone avoids a challenge, the more intimidating it may seem. The brain has no opportunity to learn that the task can be managed successfully. Another powerful feature of habits is the compounding effect they create. Just as financial investments grow over time, through compound interest, habits produce results that build upon themselves. Small improvements accumulate, leading to larger progress in the future. For example, consistent learning improves knowledge. Increased knowledge makes it easier to learn additional concepts. This creates a cycle where each step forward supports the next one. Over time, the person moves far ahead of where they began. Habits can also spread from one area of life to another. A person who develops disciplined habits in one area often begins applying the same mindset elsewhere. Someone who learns to manage time effectively in their studies may also become more organized in their personal responsibilities. This spreading effect strengthens the stronger version of the individual. Discipline becomes a general approach to life rather than a limited effort applied only occasionally. Another important lesson about habits is that occasional mistakes do not erase progress. Everyone experiences moments when routines are interrupted. What matters most is returning to the habit quickly rather than allowing the interruption to become permanent. The weaker version of the mind often tries to turn a single mistake into a reason to quit entirely. It may argue that the routine has already been broken, so continuing no longer matters. The stronger version understands that consistency is about long-term patterns, not perfect execution. Returning to the habit after a mistake reinforces resilience. It demonstrates that progress can continue, despite temporary setbacks. This attitude prevents discouragement from destroying the routine, Over time, habits begin to define the structure of daily life. The person no longer struggles with every decision because many actions occur automatically. This stability creates space for creativity, learning, and deeper focus. The stronger version of a person grows through these repeated patterns of disciplined behavior. Each habit becomes a building block for personal development. Day by day, the individual moves closer to their goals without needing constant bursts of motivation. In contrast, when habits are dominated by comfort and avoidance, the weaker version becomes the default. Progress slows because energy is directed toward distractions rather than growth. The habits a person practices every day quietly determine which version of themselves will lead their life. Through repeated action, the mind is trained either toward discipline and progress or toward avoidance and stagnation. Over time, the version that receives the most practice becomes the one that defines the person's character and future. Pain is often viewed as something negative that should be avoided whenever possible. People naturally seek comfort and stability, and when pain appears, whether physical, emotional, or mental, the immediate instinct is to escape from it. While this reaction is understandable, it can sometimes prevent growth. Not all pain is harmful. Not all pain is harm. Some forms of pain are actually signals that change, adaptation, and strength are developing. The challenges and struggles experienced today can become the very forces that build resilience and capability for the future. When people face difficulty, the weaker version of the mind tends to interpret pain as a warning to stop. It assumes that discomfort means something is wrong or that the effort is too demanding. Because of this interpretation, many individuals retreat from challenges the moment they begin to feel uncomfortable. They abandon tasks, reduce their effort, or convince themselves that the struggle is unnecessary. However, growth rarely occurs in complete comfort. Development in almost every area of life involves moments of strain. Learning complex ideas can create mental frustration. Practicing a new skill may involve repeated mistakes and embarrassment. Training the body requires pushing muscles beyond their usual limits. These experiences can feel painful in the moment, but they are often the very processes that allow improvement to occur. Pain in this sense is not simply suffering. It is feedback from the body and mind that adaptation is taking place. When muscles are exercised intensely, they experience stress that causes microscopic damage. The body responds by repairing those muscles, making them stronger than before. Without that temporary strain, the body would have no reason to increase its strength. The mind works in a similar way. When people confront difficult problems or challenging situations, their thinking abilities are stretched beyond familiar patterns. This mental strain forces the brain to build new connections and develop more effective strategies. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable because the mind has adapted. Avoiding all forms of discomfort prevents this process from happening. When someone refuses to engage with difficult tasks, they remain at the same level of ability. Their comfort is preserved, but their potential remains unexplored. The stronger version of a person understands that some discomfort is the price of improvement. Pain also teaches valuable lessons that comfort cannot provide. When things go smoothly, there may be little reason to question existing habits or strategies. Success without difficulty can sometimes create the illusion that improvement is unnecessary. In contrast, struggle often reveals weaknesses and gaps in understanding. These revelations can feel unpleasant at first. Recognizing that one needs to improve can challenge pride or confidence. Yet this awareness is essential for growth. Once weaknesses are identified, they can be addressed through learning, practice, and persistence. Another way pain builds strength is through the development of resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover from setbacks and continue moving forward. This ability cannot be developed without experiencing adversity. If someone has never faced difficulty, they have not had the opportunity to practice perseverance. Each time a person endures a challenging situation and continues working toward their goals, they strengthen their resilience. The mind learns that discomfort is temporary and survivable. Future challenges become less intimidating because the person remembers previous situations they overcame. Pain also reshapes perspective. Difficult experiences often reveal what truly matters. When someone struggles, they may reevaluate their priorities, values, and motivations. This reflection can lead to deeper understanding of purpose and direction. For example, someone who faces failure in a project may initially feel disappointment. However, that experience can encourage them to refine their approach, seek better knowledge, or improve their skills. Without the failure, they might never have recognized the need for change. Pain can also increase appreciation for success and progress. Achievements that come easily may feel satisfying for a short time, but achievements earned through effort and struggle often carry deeper meaning. The memory of the obstacles overcome becomes part of the value of the accomplishment. This connection between struggle and achievement is one reason why people often feel proud of difficult accomplishments. The process required determination, patience, and courage. Each moment of discomfort contributed to the final result. Another important aspect of pain is that it can strengthen emotional endurance. Life inevitably includes uncertainty, disappointment, and unexpected change. A person who has never faced difficulty may struggle to cope when these situations arise. Experiencing manageable forms of pain teaches the mind how to remain stable during stress. Instead of panicking or giving up, the individual learns to analyze the situation, adjust their approach, and continue moving forward. Pain can also serve as a motivator for transformation. The person becomes dissatisfied with their current situation. That dissatisfaction can push them to pursue change. The discomfort of remaining the same becomes greater than discomfort of trying something new. For example, someone who feels frustrated with their lack of progress may decide to adopt new habits, learn new skills, or change their environment. Without that frustration, they might have continued with the same routine indefinitely. However, the way pain is interpreted plays a crucial role in whether it leads to growth or discouragement. The weaker version of the mind views pain as evidence that something is wrong with the person. It may conclude that failure means lack of ability or that difficulty means the goal is impossible. The stronger version interprets pain differently, sees difficulty as part of the learning process rather than a personal defect. Instead of asking why something is so hard, the stronger mindset asks what can be learned from the experience. This shift in interpretation changes the emotional response to struggle. Instead of feeling defeated by obstacles, the person becomes curious about how to overcome them. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to develop new skills or strategies. Pain can also reveal inner strength that a person did not know they possessed. When someone faces a challenge that seems overwhelming, they may initially doubt their ability to endure it. Yet, by continuing step by step, they often discover that they are capable of far more than they expected. These discoveries build confidence. Each time a person overcomes difficulty, they gain evidence of their resilience and determination. Future obstacles appear less threatening because the individual remembers past victories. Another valuable aspect of pain is that it encourages humility and empathy. People who have experienced struggle often develop a deeper understanding of others who face similar challenges. This empathy can strengthen relationships and create a sense of shared humanity. Without experiencing hardship, it can be easy to overlook the difficulties others encounter. Struggle can expand a person's awareness and compassion, allowing them to connect with others more authentically. Pain also encourages adaptability. When plans fail or unexpected problems arise, a person must adjust their approach. This process of adaptation strengthens creativity and problem-solving skills. The mind becomes more flexible because it has practiced finding solutions under pressure. Adaptability is an essential quality in a world that constantly changes. Those who learn to adapt through challenging experiences are better prepared to handle future uncertainties. It is important to recognize that not all pain is beneficial. Some forms of suffering can be harmful or unnecessary. The goal is not to seek pain for its own sake, but to understand that certain types of discomfort are unavoidable parts of growth. Constructive pain is the kind that accompanies effort, learning, and improvement. It occurs when a person stretches beyond their current abilities and works toward meaningful goals. This pain has a purpose because it leads to development. When people accept this idea, their relationship with discomfort changes. Instead of fearing every challenge, they begin to see certain difficulties as signs that they are moving in the right direction. Over time, this mindset transforms the way obstacles are approached. Difficult moments become opportunities to strengthen character, expand knowledge, and build resilience. The pain experienced today becomes the training ground for tomorrow's strength. By enduring and learning from these experiences, individuals gradually develop the confidence and capability needed to face larger challenges. Each struggle adds another layer of experience that supports future growth. The discomfort that once seemed like an enemy becomes a teacher. Through patience, reflection, and persistence, pain is transformed into wisdom and strength. The trials faced in the present become the foundation upon which future success and resilience are built. Transformation is often imagined as a dramatic event that changes a person instantly, but real transformation rarely happens in a single moment. It usually occurs through a gradual process in which old patterns of weakness are slowly replaced by stronger habits and ways of thinking. The weak version of a person does not disappear simply because someone decides they want to change. It fades only when the behaviors and beliefs that support it are consistently removed from daily life. The weak version of a person is not defined by lack of potential. Every individual has the ability to grow, learn, and improve. Weakness usually appears in the form of habits that limit progress. These habits might include procrastination, fear of failure, lack of discipline, or constant reliance on comfort. Over time, these patterns become so familiar that they begin to shape how a person sees themselves. Transformation begins when a person recognizes that these patterns are not permanent parts of their identity. They are behaviors that were learned through repetition, and like any learning behavior, they can be replaced. This realization is powerful because it shifts the focus from blaming circumstances to taking responsibility for change. The first step in removing weakness is awareness. Many people operate on habits without noticing them. They may delay tasks, avoid challenges, or react to stress automatically without questioning their behavior. Awareness brings these patterns into view. Once a person clearly sees the habits that limit them, they gain the ability to change them. Awareness alone is not enough, however. The next step is deliberate action. If someone recognizes a pattern of procrastination, for example, they must begin practicing the opposite behavior, starting tasks promptly and completing them consistently. At first, this change may feel uncomfortable because it challenges established routines. The discomfort of change often causes the weaker version of the mind to resist. It may produce doubts, excuses, or distractions to pull the person back into familiar habits. This resistance is normal because the brain prefers stability and efficiency. New behaviors require additional mental effort until they become familiar. Transformation occurs when a person continues practicing stronger behaviors despite this resistance. Each time they act with discipline instead of avoidance, they weaken the old patterns slightly. Over time, repeated actions build new habits that replace the old ones. Another important part of transformation is replacing negative thought patterns. The weak version of a person often relies on limiting beliefs. These beliefs may include thoughts such as "I'm not capable," "I always fail," or "this is too difficult for me." These ideas can become deeply rooted because they are repeated internally over long periods. Challenging these beliefs requires evidence created through action. When a person attempts something difficult and gradually improves, they begin to see that their earlier assumptions were incomplete. Each small success weakens the belief that change is impossible. Confidence grows through these experiences. Instead of defining themselves by past failures, the person begins to see themselves as someone capable of improvement. This shift in self-perception strengthens motivation and persistence. Transformation also involves learning new skills. Weakness is sometimes a result of limited knowledge or experience rather than lack of effort. When people encounter challenges they do not know how to handle, they may withdraw because the situation feels overwhelming. Acquiring new knowledge changes this dynamic. As skills improve, tasks that once seemed impossible become manageable. Learning, therefore, becomes a key tool for removing weakness. The more capable a person becomes, the less power fear and uncertainty have over their decision. Another important element of transformation is accountability. When someone accepts responsibility for their progress, they stop waiting for external conditions to change. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people, they focus on what they can control. Accountability creates a sense of ownership over one's life. It encourages proactive behavior rather than passive waiting. Each decision becomes an opportunity to strengthen discipline and direction. Transformation also requires patience. Many people expect rapid change and become discouraged when results take time to appear. However, the habits that create weakness were often built over many years. Replacing them requires consistent effort over an extended period. Patience allows the process to unfold gradually. Instead of expecting perfection immediately, the person focuses on steady improvement. Each small step forward contributes to long-term transformation. Environment also plays a role in removing weakness. The surroundings in which a person spends time can either reinforce old habits or support new ones. Environments filled with distraction, negativity, or complacency make change more difficult. Environments that encourage growth, learning, and discipline make progress easier. Choosing supportive environments can strengthen the transformation process. This might involve spending time with people who pursue improvement, seeking educational opportunities, or creating spaces designed for focus and productivity. Another powerful aspect of transformation is the development of resilience. Weakness often appears when people encounter obstacles and respond by giving up. Each time a person faces a challenge and persists instead of quitting, resilience grows stronger. Resilience changes how difficulties are perceived. Instead of seeing obstacles as barriers, the person begins to see them as opportunities to learn and adapt. This perspective allows progress to continue even when conditions are difficult. Transformation also involves redefining comfort. The weak version of a person seeks constant comfort and avoids effort whenever possible. The stronger version becomes comfortable with growth, even when that growth requires effort and temporary discomfort. This shift does not eliminate the desire for rest or relaxation, but it changes priorities. Effort becomes part of daily life rather than something to avoid. The individual learns to appreciate the satisfaction that comes from meaningful work. Another key part of transformation is consistency. The occasional bursts of effort may create temporary improvement, but lasting change requires repeated action. The stronger version of a person emerges when disciplined behaviors become regular habits. Consistency creates stability and progress. Even when motivation fluctuates, the routine continues. Over time, these routines shape character and identity. Identity plays a powerful role in sustaining transformation. When someone repeatedly practices discipline, courage, and persistence, they begin to view themselves differently. Instead of seeing themselves as someone limited by weakness, they see themselves as someone capable of growth. This identity reinforces positive behavior. Acting with strength becomes natural because it aligns with how the person sees themselves. The transformation becomes part of their character rather than a temporary effort. Another important element of removing weakness is forgiveness of past mistakes. Many people remain trapped by regret over earlier failures. They may believe that past mistakes define their future potential. Letting go of this belief allows transformation to continue. Past experiences can provide valuable lessons, but they do not determine what a person must become. By focusing on present actions, individuals can shape a different future. Transformation also requires courage. Courage is the willingness to face uncertainty and move forward despite fear. Fear often accompanies change because the outcome is not guaranteed. The weaker version of the mind may prefer familiar struggles rather than uncertain improvement. Courage allows a person to step beyond those limitations. Each act of courage expands the boundaries of what feels possible. Over time, the person becomes more comfortable taking calculated risks that lead to growth. Another powerful result of removing weakness is increased self-respect. When a person consistently acts according to their values and goals, they develop pride in their own effort. This pride does not depend on external approval. It comes from knowing that they are honoring their commitments. Self-respect strengthens determination because the individual wants to maintain the standards they have established. Actions align more closely with long-term goals rather than short-term impulses. Transformation continues as long as the person remains committed to improvement. It is not a final state, but an ongoing process of learning, adapting, and strengthening. Each stage of growth reveals new opportunities for development. Over time, the habits that once represented weakness lose their influence. They are replaced by patterns of discipline, courage, and resilience. The stronger version of the person becomes the natural leader of their actions and decisions. Through consistent effort, reflection, and commitment, transformation gradually reshapes the individual. The weaknesses that once limited progress become lessons that contributed to growth. Step by step, the person builds a stronger character capable of facing challenges and pursuing meaningful goals with confidence and determination.